and thanks for tuning in to Spiritual Wake Up Call. I'm your host, Marilyn Tennant. In this episode, we're going to be getting into the topic of recovery, and recovery being that of addiction. So, we're going to talk about this with somebody who is very qualified and wise and just somebody that's just an amazing human being. Her name is Cole Chance, and you may have seen her on her YouTube yoga videos, CCY Studios. She just offers so much free content to people, and that's how I got to know her. But I also learned along the way that she is in recovery as well. So we're going to talk about recovery, and she's going to go into some interesting topics like recovery through the Buddhist lens and how really everybody has an addiction if you're human. So if you think that this episode may not apply to you, it does. And I guarantee that you probably know somebody that is in recovery or struggling with addiction, and it may cause a lot of pain and suffering in your life in some form. So hopefully this episode will help you reach some kind of understanding, because understanding is really going to be the key to bridging that connection, that bridge of connection that we find in this field of spirituality is so important. And also, those that are in recovery, I just want to make note that they are some of the strongest, most spiritual people that I have met. And although we think of addictions and our traumas as bad things, it is also important to note that without that suffering, we would not have gotten to where we are today. Oftentimes, when we have addictions, we are faced with a choice. We need to either grow or die. That's the choice if you are in a addiction such as what me and Cole are talking about in this episode, where it's like alcohol or drugs. You really have a choice. You're either going to grow or you're going to die from it. And I think that our souls sometimes choose this path as a way of clarity. So I invite you in on this conversation to join us with compassion if you're willing to seek understanding and listen to Cole's story of her journey. So let's go ahead and get ready to open our hearts, open our minds, and see what's inside. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Spiritual Wake Up Call podcast. I am so excited today because I have somebody that I've been looking up to for a while now, many years on YouTube. I have Cole Chance here, and she is a yoga instructor for CCY Studios and also a retreat leader of the Emerge program and Mindfulness School. And she just is an amazing human being. I know that she's going to have so much to say about the topic of discussion, which is recovery, but we're probably going to get into yoga and all kinds of other fun stuff that I just love. So welcome, Cole. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, looking forward to it.
I'm just so honored to have you in this space and share your wisdom on your journey. My journey started back in 2017 when I was in a chain of addiction with alcoholism, and I used it as a coping mechanism to cope with a lot of problems in my life, centered around relationships mainly. And I came into a spiritual awakening where it just got to a point where I couldn't maintain that lifestyle anymore. And so I ended up taking me and a friend to a 12-step program, to an AA meeting, where I met people that were so just inspiring. And I've met other people along the process that have inspired me to make the changes needed. And I was just wondering, what would you have to say on recovery and that precipice that gets people from the point of being in that chain of addiction to making the changes to change their life?
Mm. Well, it's incredibly personal and very unique to the person. So we definitely don't all, open a certain door and then that's it for us. We have a very large spectrum of what makes people decide that they want to do something different. Often people could get a really bad hangover and decide that they're not going to drink anymore. Some people get a DUI and decide that that's it for them. Some people, none of that works for. I was one of those people. So it's whenever the negative consequences, I think it's some sort of scale in our mind of like, what are we gaining? Because alcohol, I really believe that alcohol and substance and whatever we're doing, it's helping us some way. It's our solution to something. So
yes.
Is it solving more than it is harming? So I don't think that we're consciously thinking about that, but in a way we are. There's this scale that's going on, and there's a lot mixed up in that. So obviously from the outside, it can look like, of course, it's more harm than good, but you throw the denial in there, the confirmation bias in there, the pain of trying to get away from withdrawal in there. Like there's so many different things that are mixed in, but ultimately it's when somebody decides they're done. And that's just, gosh, it's just so all over the board. For me personally, I was a very low bottom. You've probably heard that language before.
Mm-hmm.
And if the listener hasn't, often they say that you need to hit rock bottom, but our bottom is different, is essentially what I'm talking about. And I was a low bottom alcoholic. So, I was in and out of hospital. I'd went to 6 rehabs. I'd been like, it was very, very clear that I was having problems, lots of medical issues. But I still was so in the denial that I was making choices, that I was choosing to do this, that I was having fun, and I just kept doing it wrong, but that I was going to figure out how to do it right. So that was kind of my obsession. And for me, in the end, it was a life and death matter. I wound up having like a stroke and an overdose in the end. So for me, it was, wait a second, I'm actually going to die. People have been telling me that for a long time, but I didn't really believe it. I always thought people were like overdoing it, like chill out, like it's fine. And then I had that realization of like, oh, okay. That's not what I signed up to do. I wasn't trying to kill myself. So that was it for me.
Right. Yeah. That people don't realize that the addiction, people that are stuck in that cycle, that it's so hard because there is a part of you that benefits from there is a part of you, and it's usually like stemming from trauma that whatever that addiction, whether it be a substance or behavior, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's what is causing that pain inside that you're trying to fill, you're trying to soothe. And this may offer an escape, a relief. And so it's just so important to have compassion for that part, because without that, I really don't feel that you can move forward. You can't heal that part adequately, I believe, without the compassion for the part that is wanting that relief, wanting that substance that helps you feel the love that you weren't able to garner yourself in life or through relationships. And alcoholism is so interesting because it's so widely, it's accessible everywhere. It's depending on the culture, but it's definitely like one of the only substances I could think of that I have to actually explain to people why I don't want to drink, and it's like, we shouldn't have to explain that, but we do. And so the peer pressure makes it hard. But like you said, it's the parts that might benefit from it that if you don't work with that part, I came to realize that I can't do it. So I got to a point where I was like, the pain, there was a fear of letting go of that addiction because it was such a great coping mechanism. And then that fear was not as strong as the pain that it was causing. So it was like, okay, this pain of what the addiction is causing, it's actually more than what the fear. So that was what it was for me. Like, I was like, well, I might as well try it. And years upon years of trying, but not seriously really trying. But then when I got to the spiritual, like, awakening, so to speak, that's when I was like, it just doesn't make sense for me to keep doing this anymore. And I have to really try now. And they say, what is it? Like, people try 11 times on average and relapse 11 times on average, somewhere around there. I'm not sure the exact number, but it's like 8 to 11, depending on who and what, it's very personal, but before you can succeed in abstaining from the behavior long-term. I did find yoga to be so great it was such a positive replacement for my body to be able to receive that love and receive that self-care. I was wondering what you have to say about that. Like, why is yoga so beneficial, and why does that help people in addiction? Like, I remember you telling your story that you were at a retreat in recovery, and your yoga instructor said something about self-love, and that was something that was not familiar to you. So do you want to speak on that for a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to touch on something that you had said earlier, again, about the healing, about that we can't really heal until we, can have compassion for those parts of ourselves. And just note, the difference between healing and sobriety, because there's a difference between like, we can get sober, we can not do something and not deal with, our shit and still be suffering quite a bit. Yeah. So I think that healing is combining sobriety with the self-compassion and the understanding and the self-inquiry about how that there's that additional step there that I think is really important, that in the beginning, we don't really need to think about so much. We just have to stop doing what we're doing. There's like, often there's like some phases there, but that differentiation that I don't know whenever I was getting sober, people talked about that much. It was more about just stop drinking and then it'll be good.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. Like, and I remember that was just the first, that was like, I just need to stop drinking. Like, if I didn't realize, like, zone in on that at first, I probably couldn't have gotten to the healing. But yeah, there is definitely a difference.
I've been trying to unpack this yoga and recovery thing for a while, because it's really interesting to me, like how, like, they have nothing to do with each other in a way. Like, they seem so random. Like, how is this replacing this, or what's happening here? Which I don't know if it's a replacement, but what a softer landing. So I took my first yoga class in one of my treatment centers, thankfully. And the first class that I took, I was in Santa Cruz, California, outside of Santa Cruz. It was really beautiful. And there was like redwoods everywhere. And the yoga shala, what I remember anyway, I would love to go back there and see how much my memory is accurate. This yoga shala was like in a big greenhouse, kind of like in a big sunroom. So there's lots of glass and you could like see all the trees. And like, I swear there's like cartoon birds chirping. It was so beautiful. Like, the surroundings were so beautiful. And I was detoxing and I was like, like shaking, and I could smell myself and I hated myself. And it's like this juxtaposition was so strong. And I remember laying there, like, on my yoga mat, like, it was just so bizarre. It's like I just landed on an alien planet. And I recall the yoga teacher, a few things that stood out to me about her is I recall her saying that she was a former junkie. And I remember being like, trying to like look at her, like trying to like see it And I remember like not believing her, like actually not believing her. Like I couldn't, because I couldn't see it. Like, no, no. And whenever she was speaking about namaste, and that's what I think that you were talking about, whenever she said what namaste was, which is something that I'd heard, but I'd never been to yoga. And the way that she explained it was that my higher self sees your higher self. And what struck me was that when she said your higher self, and I was like, me? Like, I have a higher self? I'm like, there ain't no higher self here. And I was like, wait, maybe there is. And that kind of just blew my mind. And it was at the same time when I was in and out of AA, which the higher power was really hard for me. So that really gave me something to think about and to use in as a replacement or as a support to kind of fill in that language for me of like, what would my highest self do? If I have a wiser part of me, even though most of it probably isn't, if there's one little inkling of like wisdom in me, that part, what would that do? And that was really helpful for me. And it wasn't a one and done. Like I drank on the plane home because that's what I did. Like I did the thing that you're not supposed to do all the time. I normally checked that box. Like I wanted to do the outrageous thing. So I drank on the plane home, but I remember leaving that treatment. And I remember, doing yoga for a month and thinking, I like put a note and filed it away in my head that there's something here and I'm not ready for it yet, but I'm going to come back to it. And I did. And throughout the next probably 5 years, I was kind of in and out, and I was curious about yoga, and I would kind of go to yoga studios, and I'd like kind of spy on yoga people. Like I remember like overhearing girls like in the locker room being like, do you want to go get tea after this? And they're like, yeah, that sounds good. And I'm like, okay, get tea. Like it was really like, wow, I've never been on a tea date. Like I was trying on, I was observing this like other way to live. And then I would go home and get wasted. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
But what I was gathering in the practice, is I think, well, for one, there's a physical component. There is a physical component of being in your body and just saying like, take your right hand to your left leg of like, okay, my body, like just to reconnect in some way of that. And then of course there's the breath. And like, I'd never thought about breathing before. I'd never thought about my breath and just having something to bring me into the moment. And I had a very noisy life, a very loud life. So to be quiet in these four corners of a mat and to continue to come back gave me the first really safe space that I'd ever had. And I wouldn't have called it a safe space. I wouldn't have had that language, but a space where I was continuing to come back. I was starting some sort of a ritual that it felt like a refuge, but I really didn't know why, at the time.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful story that you tell. And it is a good point that sometimes we're not ready for something right away, but being curious, like, and just watching, it's almost like a story I heard of somebody's grandma when she was a little girl. She didn't know how to swim and she was scared to swim, but she would sit there at the lake and watch all the little kids swimming, and she just watch them for days. And she didn't have anybody to teach her, but she just watch and watch. And then on day 3, she'd jump in the water and swim like a fish, just from observing. And like, you could do that with anything, in life. But that sounds like that story that you told reminds me of that way of learning how to recover, just observing first.
Absolutely. And that's how we learn things. We mimic, and that's how babies learn to do. I was with a friend last night and we were eating corn on the cob, and she has a little girl. It's not even 1 yet, but she's watching us eat corn on the cob and grab both ends of it. And then after fumbling for a while, all of a sudden she's got, corn on the cob and she's holding it like we were holding it, and that's how we learn. We mimic and we model.
Absolutely.
So when we don't have those models, it's, having to go and find that, and to see like how is a different way to live, because we really do need that, just on the way that we learn. Another thing that I wanted to say, and I think you brought up a good point that I don't know if I've actually thought about. You said earlier about yoga as self-care, which of course it's self-care, but I didn't think about it back then, nurturing myself, even though I wouldn't have called it that either. That because I was going to yoga, I knew that I was almost like voting for myself. There's this idea of like the way that what we do, we take votes, that we spend money. Like, where are you spending your money? It's like, if you have a certain amount of money, where are you spending it? It's like, I'm voting in a way with my money. I'm going to yoga instead of going to the bar. Like, I'm showing myself that it's important in some way. So I was nurturing. And then after that, I might drink less, or I might go and, eat a salad, or sit in the sunshine and read a book, rather than getting completely shit-faced right away. But it wasn't none of that was conscious. Yeah. But we propel our action, whether we're going one way or another. So I think that was a component. It's like I was voting for something good for myself. And then just in that action, I probably lifted my confidence. It probably lifted my ability of like, maybe I can do this type thing. Like, there's probably so much that came along with that.
Awesome. So do you want to talk a little bit about Emerge, the program, and what Emerge does? What's its mission? How does it work?
Yeah. So Emerge is something that I began a few years ago, and I'd thought about it for longer. So whenever I got sober, I started going to yoga quite regularly. I'll just kind of go back and finish this little through line of, I was going in and out of yoga while I was trying to get sober in the end. And you could really ask me like, instead of asking me like, how are you doing with your drinking, or how's drinking going? You could just say, when's the last time you've been to a yoga class? Because that would have got you your answer. Like, I was doing okay if I was going to yoga. That's like how much it was. Or was doing better. Not saying that I wasn't going in there with like a little wine stain on my lips or something, but I was doing better, and that's what was important. And in the end, like I had mentioned, I had a very bad, completely blew out at the end, hit my rock bottom. And I was like at a reckoning point of like, I remember somebody saying to me once that, you can be high or you can be happy, and eventually you'll realize that the two aren't going to go together anymore. And I had that ring back in my head, and I was like, fuck, like, duh, like all I was trying to do was put those two things together, because they used to go together for me. Was a very expansive, when I was younger, it was very, very expansive. And it's like, I finally had that reckoning of like, one day you're going to realize. And I was like, damn it, today's the day. Like, did not want that day to come. And I called the sober living place that I had been kicked out of prior for hiding alcohol around the house. And I begged them to come back, and for no reason that they should have, they let me back in. And I think that really saved my life, because I don't think that I could have done it without that support to be back in the community. And I signed up. I was in Austin, Texas, and I signed up for a 30-day, one of the 30-day yoga things, like 30 days for free or something, because I didn't have any money. And I just went every day. And the first day that I went, I unrolled my mat and I got in child's pose, and I just lost my shit. I was just bawling. Oh my gosh. Because something about that pose, the poses often, in our bodies have intentions in them. Have you heard about power poses?
Yeah.
Like you hold your arms up and put your thumbs up and stick out. It makes you more confident.
Yep. It works.
Lay down in child's pose, prostrate, and turn your palms up, and you're giving something over. Like,
yes. So surrendering.
And yeah. And that me getting in that position on that yoga mat, where it was like the only place where I had had a little bit of safety in these last several years, that I knew that there was something there for me. I was like, I have to stay on this mat. And, you've heard in the rooms, like, keep coming back. I was going to AA as well, but for me, it was really the yoga mat. I was like, keep coming back, keep coming back. So I just started going to yoga every day. I'm coming back every day. I'm coming back every day. And I wind up doing a teacher training later that year in that studio with a Wanderlust in Austin. And I began, probably the following year or something, I began going to treatment centers, volunteering at local treatment centers, some of which I had been a client in, and teaching yoga. And I remember the first time that I walked in to teach a yoga class, and then after class, I walked out just like crying at the door, because I had mentioned that I had been to many treatment centers, and all you want to do is leave, but you can't leave. And like, that was such a gift to walk in and to walk out. Like, oh,
Right.
I
I'm getting
really,
goosebumps just thinking about it.
just what a gift.
Yeah.
So I just loved teaching in that capacity. So I was going to more and more places and teaching in that capacity. And I began teaching in many different variations. I was living in Bali. I started traveling and doing more things. I taught at like a prison in Bali, which there was a lot of people in there for like drugs and alcohol as well. They're very strict over there. We're very lucky to be addicts in the US. I just will say that.
Wow.
And so it's my favorite. It's my favorite place to teach. It's my people. Like, I love it. And I started to compile this program of things that supported me, because I always felt like in AA anyway, I never felt like I fit that mold quite right. And whether it be the language of AA or it was just me being the rebel that I am, going back, I could see how I could, maneuver around it. But back in the day, it was like, I don't want to. But there's a line in the big book. I don't know if you remember it. And it goes something like, there are such unfortunates. There are some people who are incapable of being completely honest with themselves. Yeah. And like, they're not going to get sober, essentially is what it says. And I was like, I remember reading that in the book, and I was like, I am that. I'm that. Yeah. And that made me feel like I could never really fit, because I had that in the back of my mind, like, I'm going to be this fucking unfortunate. Like, that's my story. I'm the bad one. So I found lots of other ways to bring things that did support me. And I felt like I was outside of that umbrella. So Emerge was kind of born out of that, of like, what are all of these other ways that are supportive? Because there isn't one way. So my intention with this program is that I don't know what's going to help you. I have no idea what is going to click, what is going to turn you on, and what is going to, like, change your perspective and your views. But something is going to like resonate, and we need to be able to offer all those different tools. So I've thrown in, and by the way, I think that 12-step has incredibly valuable things in it, like, just to say that. Yeah. And we look at addiction through the Buddhist lens. We look at addiction through the yogic lens.
What is that?
Through movement and breath, and we look at the yamas and the niyamas, and we look at recovery through those ethical codes.
What can you kind of break down a little bit what the addiction is through the Buddhist lens, like, just in summary, because that's interesting to me, and I'm not sure I've heard of it.
Yeah. So essentially, Buddhism essentially speaks to the human experience as having a flavor of addiction. If you are a human, you will experience addiction. And in the West, we tend to think of addiction as like drugs and alcohol, because it's very obvious. Like, it's very tactile. There's a lot of texture around it. We know what that looks like. But we all suffer from this in ways. Like, how do you run from discomfort? How do you run from the present moment? What do you do when things aren't as you want them to be? because we are going to have suffering in life. There's 4 noble truths in Buddhism. And the first one is that life is suffering. Not that there's not joy, but that there will be suffering. As a human, you're going to have pain. And our relationship to pain is normally to run from it, and to not care about it, and to say, screw you, not to have any compassion for it. That would be what we normally do. So that could look like pills. That could look like numbing ourselves out on Netflix. That could look to running from relationship to relationship. There's a zillion, or workaholism. There's so many different ways that goes to. So it really expands the idea of what addiction is. There's a story that you could look up about the hungry ghost, which I think is really interesting. It's like a Buddhist archetype. And the hungry ghost has a really, really skinny neck. He's like a little demon, but he has a really, really skinny neck, and he has a giant belly. He's so hungry, and he cannot get enough because his neck is too small, and he's just starving, but he can't feed himself. And this idea of craving. So the second noble truth is that suffering is caused because of craving. We want things to be different than they are. We want more of that, and we want less of this. So we all have this hungry ghost in a way. So that's kind of what's that speaking to. And then they break down different types of craving. It's really speaking to addiction, but it's the human experience, which really brings us all in. And it makes it not like you over there. It's like, no, we all deal with it. And it felt so inclusive. And then it lays out ways of what we need to do is we need to change our relationship to suffering. When we don't take it personal, we realize that things are impermanent, that the things that we want aren't going to stay, that high you used to get isn't going to be there anymore, that things change. And when we realize that, we stop grabbing on so much, we stop clinging so tightly. And with that loosening of our grip comes the freedom. And then they lay out like the path to do that, which is that's the very short nutshell.
That is awesome. I am so in favor of those kinds of recovery programs that look at addiction through a different lens. Not that 12 steps, that there's anything wrong with that. And I know a lot of people who just have flourished in that program, but there also is a lot of it's not the only way. And I think that's just beautiful that you're providing that for people. So there is a California retreat coming this September, was it, that I saw? Or when was that happening again?
Yeah. So the Emerge program is an 8-week online program. And we also bring in lots of modern psychology. We look at attachment theory, internal family systems. We look at, through grief, we bring in food relationship. I have lots of teachers that come in and speak to their wisdom as well. And that's an 8-week online class that I guide, and it's all live stream online, but we go through it together, and it's pretty intensive. And then I'm doing a retreat in California in beginning of September, and that's Emerge inspired. So of course we can't throw an 8-week program in 5 days, but it'll be Emerge inspired. So we'll be going through and, looking at the ways that, the ways that we constrict, the ways that we expand, and then we'll get to do that in community in the Redwoods.
That sounds beautiful. That I'm just congratulate you for putting that together. And is there anything that you want to say about the Mindfulish school? Because that was something else that I saw where you do teacher training. There's a 200-hour teacher training, a 300-hour teacher training. Was there anything else that you wanted to say about that school?
The Mindfulish school is born of me and my dear friend and co-teacher, Jack. She's an incredible human. And we call it the Mindfulish School because, we want to not take ourselves so seriously. We want to kind of loosen up and really enjoy this process of spirituality and self-inquiry. And it's really grounded and authentic and incredibly fun. And we both came to this practice through some human challenge. So I think our perspective is refreshing in the yoga world. And this practice has supported us and really shifted both of our lives. And we love to share it. We love to, be able to filter this magic through and share it with people and let them then, turn it and percolate with it in their own world and begin to share it in their own unique way as well. So it's just a really beautiful program. We actually take off in like a few weeks, but we try to do a couple a year. We've been doing some online, but hope to shift to in person soon. So hopefully Bali next year is the plan.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so fun, and just a great another outlet to express your being through yoga and connection, which I think is so important for people in recovery, is the connection, because we use these substances or behaviors to gather connection that's missing, I believe, a lot of the time. And so these programs and these different ways to connect with others through yoga, whether that's just one example, we talk about yoga a lot in this podcast, but there's so many other ways to connect in a healthy way with people. So if you're out there and you're struggling with addiction, know that you're not alone and that there is help. And I'm going to make sure to definitely post all of these different outlets that Cole Chance is bringing for the world to share in and help heal those parts. It's just beautiful. So I thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we take off?
I don't think so. I think I will add, just if anyone is interested, I do have a resource list on Emerge, emergerecovery.com. I've just listed some books that I've really resonated with, some podcasts that I like, some online meetings, some Buddhist Dharma talks. Like there's lots of actually resources if you want to go in and have a poke around and see what resonates. All for free and stuff on the website.
Awesome. I'm going to put those links at the bottom in the description. And I thank you so much for joining me in this conversation, Cole. It's so important. The resources are there for people when they're ready to reach out after observing as much as they need to and watch until you can get to that point when you're ready. There's people there. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. You will.
So that's it. We had a beautiful conversation, beautiful energy. I really feel like talking to Cole is just, it gives you like such peace just talking to her. And when you're around somebody who has found self-love, self-care, it tends to be contagious. And I really feel like that's how it is when talking to Cole. And I just want to make note also, one of the points brought up in the conversation was that there is a part that benefits from you, from whatever addiction you have, whatever that thing is that you're seeking to fulfill the void, to feel the love, or if it's an escape. And I think it's important to look at that part that is getting the benefit and to fulfill that need, to continue to fulfill that need of that part in a different way, in a healthy way. And that's what yoga does. So I feel like that's just one of the many ways to fulfill the need of the part that benefits from addiction in a healthy way. It could be, though, other things like art, music, connecting at social gatherings that don't involve alcohol. There's just so many different ways, and it's out there. And I'm going to make sure to list the resources that Cole is speaking of. But I really thank you for taking the time to join us on this conversation and seek understanding, because that's what this world needs now. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.